Hey there, and welcome back to the channel. First things first, I want to wish everybody a happy new year. I hope you got to spend some time with family or close friends over the holiday season here. And now let's dive back into it. We're going to talk about what happened in the month of December in Cochrane Alberta's real estate market, as well as give you a slight overview of just everything that happened in 2025 and what that may look like moving into 2026 here as we move along. So first up, the real estate market overall in 2025 did transition in the Calgary and Cochrane areas to a much more balanced market. Now, Cochrane, due to its demand for the area, did seem to hold that off a little bit longer. Calgary Airdrie fell into that balanced market much earlier on in 2025, whereas we didn't really start seeing the effects until kind of like late into quarter 3 and into quarter 4 here in Cochrane. And as we've discussed here in the previous few videos, we've seen a very high percentage of new listings hitting Cochrane Alberta's market over the past, 4 or 5 months, with upwards of 50% or more of those homes being new construction. Now, what that's done is create higher inventory levels, with Cochrane's current months of supply upwards of 5 months. Now, that's quite high, especially over the past 4 years, where we've seen lows as low as in the 1.5s, 1.6s. Now, with that being said, like I've mentioned in all my other videos, 50% or more of those homes, of that inventory, is new construction listings with a timeline of construction that could be anywhere from, quick possession, ready in a couple months, to 7 to 10 months, and they haven't even broken ground yet, but it's listed on the MLS. So our inventory numbers here in Cochrane, due to our high percentage of new construction listings on the public market, is a little bit skewed in terms of when you can actually move into your home. When we talk about sales numbers, the month of December actually saw a 10% increase in sales over last year. Now, Cochrane, again, being a smaller center, we had 43 sales in the month of December. 10%, it's really only 4 additional home sales, but still, it's a big number. And as we look into 2025 as a whole, we finished up very similarly in the number of sales as to 2024. In fact, the difference over the whole year was only 10 sales. 974 this year to 984 last year. So despite the balanced market, sales are still happening here in Cochrane at a similar rate to they were last year, where the market was much stronger. So moving forward, I wouldn't expect our sales numbers to decrease. Now, obviously, we're going to see sales numbers increase year over year as population does, just as a slight thing. But if we were seeing a true pullback and a true major correction, we would see lower sales numbers, and we would see further price drops from what we have been seeing in the past few months here in Cochrane. So I would take that as a good sign that Cochrane's market still is strong and still is desirable. Okay, now let's talk prices. And in terms of the benchmark price, we're going to split it, like always, into overall and detached. The overall benchmark price in Cochrane dropped 1.3% for the month of December. That doesn't seem so bad when you factor in that Airdrie dropped 6.2%, Calgary dropped 4.7%, and then Okotoks was very similar to Cochrane at about 1.6%. So in terms of a slowdown in pricing, we are in the dead of winter. It is the holiday season. It is to be expected that prices slow a little bit. However, we are not slowing nearly as significantly as Airdrie and Calgary in the overall benchmark. So once again, a positive sign for those looking to either buy in Cochrane and feel good about their investment, or those looking to sell in Cochrane. Before we jump into the detached benchmark price, an interesting thing to note with that is that there was only 28 detached home sales in Cochrane. So whenever we're talking about a small sample size, obviously the numbers can be quite skewed either way with just one low or one high sale. So the number I'm going to give you is different than what we've seen in Cochrane for months, but I wouldn't be too alarmed because, again, we're only using a sample size of 28 sales. Cochrane's detached benchmark price dropped 3.6% in the month of December. Now, that again is compared to a over 6% drop in Airdrie, a 2.6% drop in Calgary, and then only about a 1% drop in Okotoks. However, Okotoks is not suffering from the higher inventory that Calgary, Airdrie, and Cochrane is. Okotoks still has a relatively low inventory for its long-term trend. Okay, so that is what Cochrane did in the month of December. But if we want to look at the long-term play or the long-term trends of Cochrane, let's look at the entire 2025, and we're going to look solely at the total benchmark price here because that's the easiest number to look at. Now, Cochrane actually, for the year of 2025, despite being in a balanced market for almost half of it, still saw a 3% growth year over year in its total benchmark price. That, again, in comparison to Airdrie and Calgary, that both saw 2% decreases in their overall benchmark price, is a big thing. Again, Cochrane is still seeing a good, healthy demand for people moving into this area. And as such, the home prices, despite being in a balanced market, are holding strong and even increasing some value year over year. Now, obviously, that is very property specific. Detached homes have not seen that increase. The increase has really come from the increased cost of new townhomes and new duplexes, as those have become quite more expensive over the last few years. However, it still shows a positive trend in the actual Cochrane Alberta real estate market year over year, which, if I am looking as a buyer, I'd want to be buying in a market that I feel is going to protect me in slower markets and then obviously gain in bigger markets. But I think that protection in the slower markets is just as important as if you were trying to make big wins. 2025 also brought some new mortgage rules earlier this year, where the differences in what mortgages could be insured versus not, and the total number of the amount of lending you could access was changed. For details on that, you can check out that video that I have on my channel. And then later this year, they announced some stricter lending guidelines when it comes to applying your rental incomes as collateral for future mortgages, which will really just, affect the investor types. But neither of those so far have made any real change in the actual real estate market. But the one thing that we did see in 2025 that has had a little bit of an effect on the real estate market has been the Bank of Canada reducing its overnight bank rate. Now, that really has more effect on the variable rate mortgages, as our variable rate mortgages are directly tied to that number, and the bank rates and the bank's prime rates follow that a little bit more structured. So when you see a 25 basis points drop in the overnight bank rate, you typically see a 25 basis point drop in your variable rate mortgage. Where that hasn't really had an effect yet is on fixed rates. We've still seen fixed rates really hovering around that 4% for 5 years and not really changing too much in the last half of 2025. So overall, in 2025, I think Cochrane performed admirably. We had a slower market in all the major centers around Calgary. We had balanced markets, high inventory, longer months of supply, and Cochrane did the best out of the group at hedging those drops in its benchmark prices. So Cochrane is holding its value just a little bit better in these balanced market times than some of the surrounding communities, while still having higher inventories with lots to choose from for a buyer. So I would expect more of the same as we start 2026 here. I think that we're going to follow suit. We're going to have a fairly slow ramp up to what is hopefully a more normal spring season here in terms of buyer confidence and sales numbers. Now, the other thing that I want to keep an eye on here with this new market is that Cochrane is still building new homes in West Hawk, Heartland. They're still building in Fireside. South Bow Landing is still building. Greystone is still finishing up here. So with that, we still have a lot of new homes that are going to be hitting the market in 2026. However, Cochrane does have a new mayor and new city council. And the track record of that mayor and city council is to be a little bit more anti-development or slower to approve development based on their prior voting history. And that could slow down the newer construction here in Cochrane, which would then bring those inventory numbers down slightly as we get further into the year, as we see no new development starting. So that will be something really interesting to look forward to, but that won't really show itself until later into 2026. Thanks for hanging in there with me on this one. A little bit of a longer video as we're covering not only just December, but a little bit of an overview of 2025 and what to move into. If you have questions about your real estate journey, if you're thinking about moving here either to Cochrane or within Cochrane in 2026, I'd love to jump on a call with you or meet over a coffee, get to know what your situation is and see how I best can help navigate that for you. If you have any questions, just about Cochrane in general, you can drop those in a comment or feel free to send me an email. My contact information is in the description of the video below. And as always, thanks, and I will catch you in the next one.